Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Real Tech, Real Talk, a podcast from cexpose.tech. Today, we will delve into the world of eSIMs. This innovative technology is rapidly transforming the mobile landscape, offering users unprecedented flexibility and convenience. Joining us today from Mexico City to discuss the ever-evolving landscape of mobile connectivity, specifically the rise of eSIMs, is Sebastian Barros, Regional Vice President at Ericsson. So let's jump right in and explore the potential benefits and challenges of eSIM adoption. All right. Hi, Sebastian. Welcome to Real Tech, Real Talk.
Hi, Kumaran. Thank you very much for the invitation.
My pleasure, Sebastian. Besides your role at Ericsson, you also host a podcast in Mexico and co-founded the AI-powered personal assistant service Mukau, right?
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about how you manage each of these demanding endeavors, and how do you actually find the time to make sure that each part of your endeavor gets the attention it deserves?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I think it's a trade-off between sleeping and doing things to some extent. But to be honest, I'm a very curious person, right? So I started a podcast, which has nothing to do with what I do in my technical world or technology endeavors. It's more about actually understanding entrepreneurs. So here in Mexico, where I live, there is a massive inflow of entrepreneurs, startups. And I was very curious about understanding how these guys see the world, right? How entrepreneurs take such big risks. What are the things they have learned? What they have learned from failures. And it's very interesting. It's a podcast called The 10%, which actually is very interesting because out of the 100% of startups that start, after only 3 years, only 10% are left. So it's very interesting on why these people take this risk and what they have learned, right? And entrepreneurs, of course, are so important.
Yeah.
The other endeavor I have is Mukau. Mukau is actually the name of my beloved cat, which is a tuxedo cat. It's black and white. But this is more about my interest in what is the future. And Mukau has a very interesting aspect, right? I believe that today's world or today ways of interacting with digital technology or the digital world will change dramatically with artificial intelligence. If you think about today, your main window to the digital world as a consumer is applications. You have an application for taxes, you have an application for retails, you have an application for shopping and so forth. But that actually there's a lot of friction in that interaction. Mm-hmm. What I see in the future is that everything you do, you will do it through AI agents or personal assistants that, besides knowing everything about you and your family, will be able to integrate seamlessly with the world outside, right? With your favorite retail store, with your credit cards so they can pay in time, with your friends, with the knowledge about your health and your information. So in the world, if you think 10 years down the line, we will not really be downloading apps in our smartphones. We will just be integrating things from the digital world to these digital agents that will be able to talk to us like a normal human being, right? So these are the two things that I'm doing during my free time.
Your podcast is basically focused on startups, right? So is it like startups come and tell their stories and try to gain attention using your platform, or is it about?
No, it's more about it's a little bit about that. I think every single startup founder I have interviewed always pitch a little bit about their business, but it's more about what these startup founders can have learned and how these learnings can be used by other startup founders. Because if you see, right, it's very sad that out of 100 of founders that start very motivated a new business, only 10 of them will succeed, right? So I was very curious to know if there is any learning, any insights, any tips that these older founders can give to these new generations of startups that can be useful. So that's a little bit. So we'll dig into a little bit about that, especially focusing on the Mexico reality, because Mexico is like a different planet. So anyone who come here really need to learn the culture, the ways of working, the different, I don't know, ways that you do business here.
Cool. The startup scene in Mexico is really interesting.
Yes.
Up and coming, a lot of up and coming businesses, I believe. Yeah. So, okay. Today we'll be discussing eSIMs. I mean, to be very honest, right, I actually wanted to call this the tale of the disappearing SIM card, but of course, I felt eSIMs, the rise of eSIMs sounds a little bit more positive. And obviously, I don't want to disrespect the SIM, come across as disrespecting the SIM card, which has served us so well for many, many years.
Yes.
So I've decided to just call it the rise of eSIMs instead. Right? Now, the thing is, I mean, eSIMs, eSIMs actually promise incredible flexibility, right, and convenience for smartphone users. But I've also come across some experts who warn of potential security concerns like, eSIM cloning or unauthorized profile downloads. So, from your point of view, how do eSIMs compare to traditional SIM cards in terms of security risks?
Sure. So I think I agree with you. eSIMs are actually will change our industry or the telco industry in a very profound way. For the users that maybe are not so familiar with technology, SIMs essentially is a small module that you can remove from your device, like a removable smart card, and within that piece of plastic, you have your subscriber identity, your authentication keys, and other information from the subscriber that when you insert into your mobile device, it authenticates you and allows you to access to a mobile network, right? For the last 25 years, based on the GSM standard, those SIMs were physical interfaces, right? It's a piece of plastic that you need to buy and get and put it in the SIM card slot. Now, eSIMs were started in 2017. That's where we have the first eSIM release. Interestingly, it was for a smartwatch. And the cool thing about an eSIM is that you don't need that piece of plastic anymore, right? It's a non-removable chip. It's embedded into the device itself, either if it's a smartwatch or a smartphone. And of course, it eliminates a lot of things, right? It eliminates the need of a physical SIM card and all the hassle to go and configure it manually, because the eSIMs can be programmed remotely. So all the subscriber information and store of multiple profiles can be done. And of course, what makes very nice is that you can switch between different mobile networks without the physical hassle of a SIM card. Now, in security terms, both SIM cards and eSIM cards use cryptographic algorithms. So they're very secure, right? They have a lot of security protocols in order for the users to be protected on their data, but also to authenticate those users into the network. SIMs usually rely on a combination of symmetrics and asymmetric encryption techniques. So they're very, very secure, I would say. Now, eSIMs, on the other hand, I would say that it's a little bit more secure than SIM cards because the obvious reasons that you are removing a physical element. So in a way, that makes it more tamper resistant, right? Because you cannot really just go and switch, for instance, a SIM or in a way physically access or tamper the chip. And of course, the second thing that makes them very secure is that the eSIMs support remote provisioning. So all the provisioning and management of this SIM information is done remotely by the network operator. So key profiles, enhanced security features can be sent remotely. Therefore, the eSIM is always up to date with any new security things. Now, nevertheless, as always, you have, like any technology, you have risks. One of the risks of eSIMs is the potential eSIM cloning that you were mentioning, where the hackers can create a duplicate copy of the user's identity to gain unauthorized access to the mobile network, right? And do any kind of fraudulent activities. The other second thing that you can do, of course, is phishing attacks, where the hacker impersonates a trusted entity to trick the users into revealing sensitive information. I think that there are two things that users and also manufacturers three things that users and manufacturers are working on. One is, of course, to add an extra layer of protection by using a PIN or a password protection on the eSIM profile. That, of course, makes another layer of protections. The second is to use a multifactor authentication method. This is what you see when you've been asked for a biometric or an authentication app, let's say facial recognition in order to open that eSIM. That, of course, can further strengthen security. But also it's important that to have a regular update on the device software, because this avoids having any bugs or any windows of opportunity for any hacker to attack. So those three measures can mitigate the risk tremendously.
Okay. Now, I came across some statistics from a Russian cybersecurity firm. I think it's FACCT. Just give me a second. Yeah. So, a report from Russian cybersecurity firm FACCT that talks about SIM swappers in the country and worldwide have been taking advantage of the shift to eSIMs to hijack phone numbers and bypass protections to access bank accounts. I think they also mentioned that since the fall of 2023, the FACCT's fraud protection have recorded more than 100 attempts to access the personal accounts of clients in online services at just one financial organization. Now, I mean, this is, of course, a concern. So maybe from your expertise and experience in this space, maybe you could, shed some light on some steps users and manufacturers can take to mitigate all these risks.
Yeah, I think, to be very honest, I think the telecom industry is under attack. We have seen a massive growth actually in security breaches. Hackers are actually aiming telco networks everywhere. There is also a massive amount of fraudulent calls being made. I mean, here in, for instance, Latin America, 50% of the calls that you receive are related to either essentially fraudulent calls, right, or scams, which is crazy, right? So you're being attacked by hackers trying to access networks, by hackers or criminals trying to scam people over phone calls, and also hackers trying to penetrate into the device itself, right? As I mentioned before, I think there are three things that definitely people should do when it comes to eSIMs. One is to have a biometric security layer, which is essentially either your face recognition part or sometimes your digital identity or your fingerprints. Secondly, to use a password in the SIM. That's also a second layer of additional layer. And the third one is to have always your device updated to the latest version. One thing that hackers are very good at is to find vulnerabilities in software versions. I would say that that's probably 70% of the cases where the hackers access the network is because either the company or the enterprise or the user were using an old software version that has some vulnerability. So it's very important for you to have the latest software version in any device you use. Now, on the SIM swap, which is very interesting, right? There is a very recent development in the industry, which is called a SIM swap API. What does it mean? Now, the network, the telco network, can recognize if a user is changing his SIM to another phone. Let's say I steal a SIM for someone and put it in another phone, and actually can detect that and actually create an alert. That is something that many telcos are working directly with banks. So make sure that when you are making a call or making a transaction, the SIM card is actually also belonging to the right device that is registered, for instance, in that bank account. So that's also another big development that we see in the industry.
Right. Those are some great insights, Sebastian. So I think it's safe to say that eSIMs are here to stay. And one of its biggest advantages is the ease of switching carriers, right? So it'll be interesting to see how this increased flexibility actually affects the mobile phone market overall. But do you think it will lead to more competitive pricing and service offerings?
In the long term, yes, I think so. Now, it's interesting, as I was mentioning before, eSIMs were launched in 2017, and everyone expected a massive switch, right? And interestingly, now we're seeing in 2024, and although we have seen a big growth in the SIM market, still the physical SIMs are dominating, right? So uh, the adoption remains a bit low than what you could expect. For instance, they are present in 190 countries, as I mentioned, but you could see that the physical SIM market is still ranging is around 4 billion of SIMs ship every single year. That number is decreasing slowly. The eSIM market is growing. Its last year was around 400 million SIMs being shipped, so probably 10% of the total amount of SIMs used by different devices. By 2027, we see that eSIMs is going to be around 800 million. And that's going to be like 20% of all the SIMs shipped. So you could say, okay, is it growing? Maybe not as fast as we could imagine, despite all the amazing advantages, right, that you have. Like, as you said, so it's facilitating a seamless switch between carriers, and also a much more easy ways of a subscriber to use their mobile phones. Now, something that is interesting, I think, here is mobile carriers are not so big fans of eSIMs, to be honest. Why? Because of course, I mean that if this become a big adoption, their role in the value chain could be diminished, right? Imagine an example where you go to an Apple store, you buy the latest iPhone, and then for you to choose the mobile phone operator will be just one more step in in programming your phone, right? So it will be almost irrelevant, right? So that's of course one thing that makes mobile operators not to be very bullish or very big on promoting eSIMs, right? Now, there are some operators where they are actually using this as an advantage. So you see in the US, T-Mobile and Verizon are promoting eSIMs as a way to showcase their better network performance, right? So they say, look, if you have a phone, try my eSIM, and if you like this network for 30 days, it's for free, and if you like, you can stay, right? Another option that you have as a mobile operator is actually to use eSIMs as a way to create bigger bundles, right? Most of the phones today, they come with a physical SIM, but you can actually provision a few more SIMs. So you could say, look, you can have maybe two eSIMs with me. I will give you 20 GB of data. And also you can provision your smartphones or smartwatches, and then you create another package. I think these two models actually could create opportunities for operators, right? The other part that is important for me is that you see a big increase in IoT devices, and I think that's where, besides consumer, is going to be a big growth of eSIMs, right? IoT devices are used by manufacturing companies, are essentially the Internet of Things, and can be in anywhere. And because of that, you need a very simple way of provisioning the identification for the network and subscriber details, right? So I think that's going to be a big.
Right, good stuff. We've spoken a lot about eSIMs, but I think poor SIM card. I think we need to give it some love and look at its future as well. While we are witnessing its gradual decline, I don't know if it's too harsh for me to label it as gradual decline, but I think from what I can see, it's probably heading towards a direction. It hasn't entirely disappeared yet, though. I mean, there's still a mix of traditional and eSIM compatible devices, right? So, do you see a future where physical SIM cards either become completely obsolete, or will there be a niche market where they still remain relevant?
I think the legacy part will remain, right? I mean, there will always be a big chunk of devices. I mean, you have today in the world 9 billion devices. That number keeps growing, right? And probably out of those 9 billion devices, you will always have a big chunk or a pretty sizable chunk of legacy devices, right? So I would say that even though today we have 4 billion SIMs, physical SIMs being shipped every day, and we see that number is slowing down, as you see, that's an evident trend. I think in the next 10 years, probably physical SIMs will remain in the range of 2 billion. Now, I think the eSIMs will grow faster, and we see that they're doubling every 3 years. And probably we see that by maybe 2030, the amount of eSIMs being shipped compared to the physical SIMs will be probably in the same levels. So for the future of devices, eSIM will be the way. Probably you will still remain with a big amount of legacy devices that will require eSIM, physical SIMs.
Okay, all right. Interesting. So, right, let's move away from SIM for a bit, but we are still staying in the smartphone sphere. I noticed you posted a rather thought-provoking issue on LinkedIn, about banning smartphones in schools. You cited Norway's implementation of the ban and the notable benefits it's resulted in, such as reduced student visits for mental health issues, lower bullying rates, and so on. I also came across a couple of other research that kind of supports the Norway outcome. There's a 2023 global education monitoring report from UNESCO, which mentioned that removing smartphones from schools in Belgium, Spain, and the United Kingdom was found to improve learning outcomes, especially for students that were not performing as well as their peers. These examples are compelling, no doubt. And it makes a good case for doing this. But of course, translating this universally across different cultures and educational systems will be a challenge. So I like to get your thoughts here. For countries considering such a move, right? Would a viable alternative be a system where, like students hand their phones in before classes start, or only allowed to use it when it supports learning, instead of totally prohibiting students from bringing their phones to school?
Good point. I think the Norway case is maybe the extreme because they essentially just ban smartphones. They did it in approximately 400 middle schools, so it's a pretty big ban. And of course, they saw a lot of benefits, which is what is very interesting in this study, right? They saw a reduction in psychological specialists visitations. They saw a reduction in bullying, mainly in girls, which is interesting. And they saw actually an improvement overall in actually academic performance, which of course make us see this as a good thing. Now, coming back to your point, I come from a different generation, right? In my times, there was no electronics besides maybe a very simple calculator in school, right? Now, I think as a main, my view, right, as a main point, you cannot really ban digital interactions from school completely. I don't think that's very healthy, and because our kids live in a different world, right? They live in a world where the digital world is as important as the physical world. I see that with my kids. They have friends they never met. They know them from social media, from playing games, but I know that they're as important as their physical friends. So banning smartphones will be as ridiculous as banning calculators in engineering classes, right? It doesn't make sense. Now, what I think we should consider, and coming back to your example, is maybe something more middle ground. I think definitely what we should do is that students should hand out their mobile phones before a class start, unless they need to use the phone for a specific research. Uh, that's one way, and I think that's a little bit more middle ground because, of course, you cannot prohibit the students for with their social life, right? But of course, you shouldn't allow things that completely distract the education process in the classroom. The second thing, which I think is more challenging, and I think is going to be even more challenging with AI coming into the classrooms, is how teachers can incorporate smartphones and AI as part of the learning process. Because
Mhm.
you cannot, I don't know, uh, I mean, you cannot deny the smartphones and artificial intelligence as a part of, as a key part of our kids' life in the future. So I
Yeah.
think here educators need to think a little bit more profoundly and see how they can use these tools as part of the education process. And the third one, and maybe this is an idea for any entrepreneur down there, I think what the schools should do is that they should use applications that actually partially uh, stop the use of a smartphone during a classroom. So imagine you have an application that is used by the school where all students need to download this application because maybe there they can see the school grades and the next homework. And on the other hand, with that same application, the teacher can actually block certain capabilities of the students' devices, so thereby they can focus on the learning, right? So these are three ways that maybe you could look into not being so dramatic and banning completely a smartphone from schools.
Yeah. Yeah. I think banning it might be pushing it a bit too far, but then again, because I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer. Like, I mean, phones are a distraction, uh, whichever way I look at it. I mean, I've been in many meetings where even even if you put your phone on on vibrate mode, right? If your phone buzzes on the table a little bit, everybody gives you the look of disdain. It's
Right.
like you get the look that, but it is a distraction whether we like it or not. The question is how to I think in this instance, it's a case of how to rather how to avoid that distraction, but still put it to good use and make sure that it's actually benefiting learning rather than just being brought in there and and things go all over the place with all sorts of losing focus and stuff. I think that's going to be the
Yeah.
the ultimate challenge. But yeah, you make some valid points as well. Right, Sebastian. So let's end this on a rather inspirational note. I'd like you to, share your opinion on what's the most, important personality trait or strengths that someone will need to work in your industry and be successful in your job.
Interesting point. I, I think there are two. There are two. One is resilience. If you like telecommunication and technology, you know that this industry goes in ups and downs. And yeah, I give you a recent example. There was a massive hype with 5G. 3 years ago, we thought that we will be, I don't know, driving flying cars and doing remote surgeries. And of course, after 3 years, we realized that that's a little bit of too ambitious goal and that will take longer. And now everyone is kind of completely disappointed that 5G doesn't have any value. Uh, it happened the same with 4G, 3G, 2G, right? So you have this technology ups and downs where there is a lot of hype and then there's a massive, almost like a bipolar industry. And I think for that you need a lot of resilience because you need to understand the long-term vision. At the end of the day, in my view, telecommunication industry is one of the most relevant industries in humankind history, right? I mean, the fact that we can now take a call like you and me, right, and do this podcast and be in real time talking and sharing, even though we are in different continents, in different time zones, is just a massive achievement of humankind, right? So I think you need to, but you need to have that resilience that uh, there's a lot of noise around you. The second, I think, is curiosity. Curiosity, I think, is a massive trait that you need to have. Because why? I mean, the industry change and the technology change by the day. When I joined this industry, I was just starting to talk about GSM, 2G, Edge. Then rapidly we moved to 3G, 4G, 5G. Now we are already talking about 6G. And also you have technologies like artificial intelligence that comes and start disrupting also your industry. So what you learned yesterday probably will be useless the next day, right? So you need to have this sense of curiosity to learn every single day something new, challenge your beliefs, and be able to adapt to change. I think those are the two big traits you need to have for working in telecommunication, but also I think technology as well.
All right. That's interesting. The thing is, you mentioned earlier about about you're from a different generation, right? Actually, that got me thinking. After all this, SIM cards and eSIM discussion, I'm actually terribly missing the glory days of the payphone, where you carry a bunch of coins and just put it in there. And sometimes when you urgently need to make a call, you just don't have coins.
Yeah, I mean,
Those are the good old days, isn't it?
good old days, right? I mean, I think it's amazing to see that, and that was not so long ago, right? So that is what is interesting, but also a bit scary, right? How fast
Yeah.
things are changing, right? Probably
Yeah,
it
exactly.
seems like we don't have really control of it, so we're just being pushed by inertia to change everything.
Yeah. I mean, the challenge would be either you suddenly run out of coins, or you have a lot of coins, but you have a row of payphones that don't work.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I mean, probably our life was less stressed than today, right? Because
Exactly.
if someone was urgently trying to contact you, and yeah, you were not close to a mobile phone or to a phone, to a fixed phone, I mean, you will never know, right? So
Yeah.
I think the stress levels, the cortisol levels in these days are much higher than when we were younger.
All right, Sebastian, thank you very much for sharing your expertise and providing valuable insights on eSIMs. I mean, as the tech continues to evolve, it'll be interesting to see how it shapes the future of connectivity, and let's see how it moves forward. And hopefully, we can have another discussion about this much later when it's
Yes.
when it's boomed or blossomed into something that's really dominating the world.
Fantastic. Thank you very much again, Kuran. I'm happy to be and join you for this interesting discussion about eSIMs. Thank you.
It's clear that the eSIM technology represents a significant shift in mobile connectivity. While convenience is a major advantage, security considerations must be addressed. Thank you for watching. Please check out cexpose.tech on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and our website cexpose.tech. The links are in the description. I'll see you again in our next episode with more tech and more talk.